All right, Jeff, you should be unmuted and we are ready for your presentation.
All right, just to confirm, can you hear me, one, and can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, great. All right. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Natasha. My name is Jeff Goumas, and as Ken introduced, I'm the executive editor for adult education with McGraw-Hill Education. And we are excited to have this opportunity to present to you Common Core Achieve Online, which, as Natasha mentioned earlier, is basically our newer version of what formerly was the GED Online program. So Common Core Achieve Online has had a number of sort of soft releases, and it's fully available now as of this month. And so all of the features and functionalities are available within the program. So you guys are starting off at a good point where we won't have any sort of interim updates that we need to pass along to you. So what I'm going to do very briefly is just go through what Common Core Achieve Online is, some of the special features of the program that we feel make it the best online solution for the high school equivalency test, and then I'm going to hop into the system and show you some of the features that I know, based on talking with users, are the most sort of sought after and require the most sort of description and background in terms of knowing how certain things work. So without further ado, let's see if we can click here. Sorry. Okay, so Common Core Achieve Online it contains 4 subject areas: reading and writing, mathematics, science, and social studies. And it has course pretest, course post-test, lesson level pretest and post-test, and lessons that are aligned to the content that is covered in all 3 of the high school equivalency exam. So that's one thing that's important, particularly for a state like New Mexico, where the state has decided that all 3 high school equivalency tests are approved within the state. This is an all-in-one program that, regardless of the test that you are helping your students prepare for, there is content in here that aligns to the test. So this is a from-the-ground-up program. We built it starting from scratch, starting last spring, once we knew that there was actually going to be momentum in the area of competition of the high school equivalency market. So last March was when the first state, and that was New York, decided to go with an alternative to the GED. And as you're aware, if you've been following, many states have followed suit with either going with one alternative, 2 alternatives, all 3, or the GED. There's a number of states still in motion. So once we had that sort of knowledge base, we built from the ground up, and we gathered the content objectives for all 3 of the high school equivalency tests, the TASC, the HiSET, and the GED, to make certain that the content that we developed aligned to those tests. Additionally, for students within the system, it is an instructor-level decision that the student is going to have instruction delivered to them aligned to a specific test. As part of that instructional alignment, not only are the lessons aligned to the content of the specific test, but the pretest and the post-test at the course level and at the lesson level are all mirroring the format of the test that students can expect to see. So if it is a HiSET student, the student is going to see only multiple choice items for all the subject areas, because at present that's the only item they'll see on the test. If it is a TASC student, they're going to see primarily multiple choice questions for all of the subject areas except for math, where they will see the gridded response item, which is still a part of the mathematics subtest within the TASC test. And if they're a GED student and preparing for the GED, they're going to see all of those new technology enhanced items that are part of the GED. So the drag and drop items, the hotspot items, the pull down, close items, all of those items are built into the lesson assessments and the course assessments, so that not only is the instruction aligned to the test, but they're getting practice answering those types of questions within the program. So in terms of the tests that are available, there are diagnostic pre-tests at the start of every course and mastery tests at the end of every course to help determine what students need to study, and at the end, what they've mastered within that subject area. For every single lesson, and there's over 130 lessons across the 4 subject areas within the program, for every lesson, there is a pretest, an instructional module with audio for all text, and a post-test for students to pretest their knowledge. They do have the ability to skip lessons based on success in the pretest, and then post-test to determine student mastery. In terms of reporting, we have time on task for all students at the student and the class level. We always have the time in system reporting that's often required for NRS reporting within adult education, and I'll show you what that looks like on the program. And finally, for instructors, one of the nice features that we built into this program based on feedback from previous programs is we have a variety of modes for which you as the instructor can choose to have students work within the program. So it goes from completely hands-off, which is a self-paced mode, which is probably similar to what you use, where a student is given access to the program, and then they can work at any lesson in any order they want, all the way over to more control with instructor-led mode, which is a mode in which the student only sees lessons as they are assigned by the instructor. And I'll show you what those three modes look like when we get into the system. And actually, that's what I'm going to do now. So let me hop over to Common Core Achieve Online. So I'm not going to get into student rostering during today's call. That was something that Ken had requested. I do not do because we want to focus on the program features itself. But just so you know, this is the login screen for Common Core Achieve Online, and you'll get it when you get your access codes, either this week or next. It's through a program called ConnectEd. Now, what ConnectEd is basically it's a program that is used McGraw-Hill education-wide. So K-12 students use this, adult education students use this, higher ed students use this as the program for which access codes are redeemed, as the program for which students are rostered into classes. And the reason that we built Common Core Achieve Online using this as the base in terms of enrollment is so that for your customer service issues and any issues you have with access codes and anything regarding your annual licenses, our customer service is much more readily able to address those issues or needs of you because they're very highly trained in the ConnectEd program. What you're going to see is once I go into ConnectEd, I actually launch out of ConnectEd into Common Core Achieve Online. So that is one thing to note, is that ConnectEd is really for where you as an instructor do all of your classroom management in terms of setting up students and setting up classes. Everything else in terms of assigning lessons and in terms of creating course settings, in terms of running reports, happens on the Common Core Achieve side. For students, it's the same thing, but they really don't do anything in ConnectEd other than log in, and then they launch into Common Core Achieve Online. But what I'm first going to do is log in as an instructor. And ConnectEd is also an area where we have the ability to communicate with you. So as you see here, as I noted earlier, we've had a number of soft releases. So when we had our last release of updates on March 14th, which was the addition of new content within one of the subject areas and new content for the test, we put it in here so that all customers get that and it's stored for you in one nice place. But once you're in ConnectEd, all you're going to do is click on this icon, and it is going to bring you to Common Core Achieve Online. Now, what you're seeing as I present this is actually the view of an instructor who has already done a fair amount of setup and has students working in the program. On day one for you, you're actually going to get two things. First, you're going to get a prompt for you to provide Common Core Achieve Online, which is the learning management system we're now in, with your email address. That's a very important step because that allows the system to know to whom reports should be emailed if you choose to set up recurring reports. And I'll show you what those are in a minute. But the system has the ability for you to set up weekly, daily, monthly, middle of the month, every 2 weeks, however, whatever the duration is you want, to set up automated reports that are emailed to you on a regular basis so that you can track student milestones within the system, such as what their assessment completion is and what their assessment scores are, what their lesson completion is, who's completed a course, who's completed a unit of instruction, any number of things. So you have the ability to run those manually each time you want to see them, but you also have the ability to set those up as recurring reports that get emailed to your email address, meaning after you've set them up, you actually don't even have to go into Common Core Achieve Online to see those reports because they'll be emailed to you on a regular basis. So that email, when you enter it in, needs to be one that you do use, an actual valid email address, because that's where those reports are going to be sent. The second thing that you're actually going to see when you log in is a welcome message. And I just jumped into what's called the Messaging Center, which is where all communication happens in the program. But you're going to have a message that basically explains to you that since you are first logging into Common Core Achieve Online, the only way that your students are going to be able to begin working in the program is if you establish your course settings for each of the courses. So this message, which is a pop-up when you first log in, ends up in your message center, and it walks you through the steps that you're going to have to do in order to get your classes up and running and for them to have instruction available to them. And that's the majority of what I'm going to be showing you today. Going back to that home page, which is your dashboard, and this is where you land every single time you go into Common Core Achieve Online. You'll see there's 4 basic areas on the instructor dashboard. The first is critical students. Critical students is an area where you get alerts for any students within any of your classes that have either failed the post-test or have an assignment that is past a due date that you assign. So anytime a student fails a post-test, and that post-test failing point is based on a score that you select. But anytime a student has failed the post-test, you receive an alert within your critical students area just so you can be monitoring students and knowing when a student or students are having difficulty in here. Now, since this is my demo account, I don't have a lot of active students, so you don't see any students who have failed any post-tests. But I do have a student in here that has a past due assignment. And what you can basically see, and this is the way these all function, is I click on the subject area, and then I see a student in this particular case has 2 assignments that are overdue. And here I have the ability to see which assignments they have that are overdue. Now you'll see over here a number of functions that I have the capability of doing within critical students. Just like those pesky Outlook reminders that you get, you know, if you have a meeting and you get this reminder and you never dismiss it, so they add up and suddenly you have 50 reminders. You have the ability to simply remove all of the reminders that you have within here, or remove individual ones based on just sort of acknowledging that, you know, the student needs to work on that and removing it. Now, what I do have the ability to do for all of these is to, for the student, send a message. And in this case, embedded in the message that I send them is going to be the lessons that they have overdue, or in the case of failed post-test, the lessons for which they failed the post-test. So that's pre-populated with this information. I have the ability to change the subject area, and then I can tell the student, I noticed you had assignment. And then I can send this message to that student directly, and so they'll get a reminder from me that these assignments are past due. There's a lot of messaging within the program that allows you to, at point of use, message students based on certain things, and I'm going to show you some of those places there. There is a messaging center where you could start emails or messages to students from scratch. All of the messaging within Common Core Achieve Online is teacher to student and student to teacher. Even if you message 5 or 10 students regarding something, each of those students only sees their name. They don't see what other students were messaged. So if you're failing about a group of students who had difficulty with a particular test, only the student's only going to see their name. They're not going to see the other students that may have had difficulty. Within the failed post-test areas, you'll see there's, again, no unaddressed critical students at this time for any of these subjects. But what you also have the ability to do is if Iris, the student that had an assignment that was past due, failed lesson 1.1 of mathematics, that's going to show up here, and there's going to be a link that actually links you directly to Iris's post-test report. So you'll be able to see what she did, what answers she selected, what the correct answers were, and actually message her based on that report to let her know what she needs to work on, if maybe it's additional work outside of the program with other materials, or specific help on some of the questions within the post-test. So that's the critical students area. It's an ability, it just gives you the ability to stay on top of things. You'll see I can switch from class to class, and I'll see the various students within each of those classes, and if there's any critical alerts that are part of those classes. The assignment tracker is the second area, and this is just more for you to have an at-a-glance view of student completion within the lessons and assessments. So again, you can select a class, you can select a subject, and you can select a chapter of instruction, and it gives you the opportunity to take a look and see what student progress is. So here's an example of how I would use that. I'm an instructor, and I assigned all of Chapter 5 here in Reading and Writing to my students, and it's due this Friday. So I have the ability on, say, Wednesday or Thursday to hop in here, go to that class, go to that assignment, and see what percentage of my students have actually completed the assignment. So in this case, you see 100% of the students have completed these two subjects, but I've got 3 other lessons for which nobody has started. So I might want to send a message to my students in this class saying, hey, just a reminder, you have all of your Chapter 5 lessons are due Friday. I noticed there's a number of students that have not begun. Please make sure that you're completing these assignments on time. So this is just a way for you to monitor lesson completion if you're tracking that. And particularly, this is helpful if you have students working with an instructor-led mode where you've set actual due dates for each of the lessons. From here, you also have the ability to create new assignments or view all of the assignments for whichever class you have selected on the pull-down menu here. The messaging center is the third sort of quadrant here within your dashboard, and this is where you see your most recent messages from students or from the system in this case. You have the ability to view all or create new directly from here, and all of your messages are also available from the messaging center here in the menu bar. And then down here is a reports widget, which allows you to go directly to specific types of reports for you to run either manually or to set up recurring reports. And again, I'll be showing all of those to you during this call. And for that, again, there's a reports area here up top where you get to the main menu for that. One thing I probably should have started with is right up here, you'll notice that you have this little help menu. If you click on help, it is a PDF of the teacher user guide for the program, which is a downloadable PDF. So it's probably a great idea for you to download that the first time you log in, and you'll see it goes through extensive detail on how to do all of the things that I just talked about and we'll be talking about today. So establishing your settings for your courses, how to use your dashboard, understanding what the content is within each of the subject areas, how to use and run the reports. Those are the biggies. And it walks through in detail all of those things. And also how to use that connected portion where you're setting up your classes and setting up your students within the program. Sorry, I need to get back to here. Okay. So what I'm going to jump into now is that day one setup that I was talking about earlier. So on day one in a normal situation, this would be what you see here. Down here, it would say you have no assignments because you must establish your course settings, and there'd be only one message to you, and that is this welcome message from the administrator. All of the course management that you do within Common Core Achieve Online happens right here in this subjects area of the menu bar. So I'm going to click on the subjects tab, and it's going to bring me to this area where you'll see there are my 4 subject areas: reading and writing, mathematics, science, and social studies. Now on day one for you, none of these is going to be populated. Each of these is going to tell you that you need to establish your course setting. but there's really 4 steps involved in getting courses set up within Common Core Achieve Online. And this is really a one-time action. Once you establish the settings that fit your instructional style, after that, it's just a matter of creating new classes and accepting the settings for those classes. We tried to make this as streamlined as possible for you and as flexible as possible for you, so that as you go, if you change your mind in terms of how you want to administer your classes, you can, so that as you go, if you start needing to teach high-set instead of GED curriculum, you have the ability to do that. You always have the ability to update things for new classes. The first step of course setup is establishing your curriculum. Now, my curriculum on here is currently aligned to the GED test. On day 1, what you will actually see is a pop-up message or a step that looks like this. So the very first step that you're going to do, and this applies to all courses, is selecting the curriculum for the test that your students are preparing for. So there's the GED test, the high-set exam, and the task test. Now, one thing to note, and I don't know that many folks on the ground know how they're even going to be doing this, but for this setting, the setting of curriculum cascades down to all subjects. So you cannot have math, high-set, reading and writing, GED, science, and TAP within the same instructor account. I don't know how states and instructors and administrators are determining how they figure out who teaches what to which students. But in the case of states like New Mexico, if you have students that are preparing for high-set, and you have some students that are preparing for task, and you have some students that are preparing for GED, the only way to really do that in a way that is manageable is to have separate instructor accounts for each, because this selection of the curriculum is something that cascades down to all subject areas. Now, you do have the ability to change as you go, and that's built in because of the fact that there are some states that currently are only GED, but within the year might select another test. And in those states, there's going to be a hard stop where teachers have to stop teaching for the GED test and start teaching for the TAP test or the high-set test. And so we built in the ability to change it. When you change that curriculum, it only applies to new classes. Technically, you could do that on an ongoing basis, but it would get very confusing very fast for the instructors. So the best practice, in my mind, if you happen to be an instructor who is actually preparing students for multiple tests, is to create separate instructor accounts so that you're not confusing the content within the two. So on that first step, you would make this selection. And again, that's already been done by me, so I'm not going to actually click on any of these. I'm just going to go back to subject. But you would click the test that you want your curriculum aligned to. The second step that you would do for course setup is to establish what are called the course settings. Now, again, for me, these are already established for my 4 courses. But for you, starting off on day 1, you actually wouldn't see what I just showed you. You would see a screen that looks like this. So for reading, I would select the mode of instruction that I would like to use. So this is step 2. There are 3 modes of instruction in Common Core Achieve Online. There's self-study, there's self-paced, and there's instructor-led. There's a lot of detail in the manual about what those three modes are. But you can also learn about those right on the screen before you make a selection. So you'll see for each, I could use my default settings, which are the settings that we have made default based on working with lots of folks like yourselves and knowing what the preferences are for, say, passing scores, what the preferences are for how to use a pretest, what the preferences are for how to use post-tests within lessons. You could also customize any of those settings, and you can do that for each of these modes. But in terms of the 3 modes, the description is right here. And the way I look at this is you're going from pretty much completely hands-off in terms of the instructor to completely hands-on, and self-paced is somewhere in between. So the self-study mode is a mode, and this is the mode that the old GED Online and some of our other software basically was like, is a mode where once you create your course settings and release the course to your students see all lessons within the course. They have the ability then to go to any lesson in any order and make their way through the lessons in that manner. This is a mode that allows for a lot of flexibility for students and allows students to focus particularly on the skills that they at an individual level need to focus upon. So what's nice about self-study is the student takes a course pretest, and based on that course pretest, they can see by chapter how they did. So they can see the number of items they got right in Chapter 4, the number of items right they got in Chapter 7. And based on that, you and your student can determine what's the best study plan for that student, and they can work through the lessons in that order in self-study mode. Self-paced mode is student-driven in terms of the pace at which they work. However, this is a mode in which you as the instructor set the order of lessons that you want the students to work in within that class. So maybe you just want them to work from Chapter 1 through Chapter 8. That's the default curriculum. You set students in self-paced mode. And so in self-paced mode, a student logging in is only going to see Lesson 1.1. They will only be able to start Lesson 1.2 after they've completed Lesson 1.1. So they're working in an order, and they can work as fast or as slow as they want, but they're working in the order that you as the instructor have determined. The instructor-led mode is a mode in which you as the instructor don't want students to see anything until you release a lesson to the students. So this is one where you may be teaching certain concepts in class, and you want to use these lessons in Common Core Achieve Online either as a to diagnose what students' level of understanding are before you actually teach a lesson, because it may be that they've already mastered a certain concept, or you could use it as a post in-class instruction where you've taught a lesson on main idea and details or cause and effect in class, and then you assign the Common Core Achieve Online lesson as a post work for that student, and that provides you not only with additional instruction for that student, but it also provides you with a pre and post test for that student to see if after the in-class instruction and the online instruction, they've mastered those skills. Now, this is a selection that cascades down only to each course. You have the ability to use a single mode in all 4 subject areas if you want. So if you want your students in self-study, you just decide, I'm going to use the default settings for each subject. You go into each subject and you say, use default self-study, use default self-study, use default self-study, use default self-study, and you're done. But you may decide that, I'm really focusing on reading and writing and mathematics in my in-class instruction, so I want to use instructor-led mode for those subjects so that I can be doing the online lessons in tandem with my in-class instruction. But I also obviously want the students to have access to social studies and science, which are also tested. So maybe since we're not doing any sort of in-depth instruction in class for those subject areas, I put them in self-study mode for those. So there's any number of configurations you can do across the 4 subject areas. What you have the ability for each of these to do is to also click on this Learn More. And what Learn More is it helps you understand what the pre-test settings are for the course, what the lesson pre-test settings are, and what the lesson post-test settings are for the course. So I'm going to walk through those very quickly with you right now. So these are all settings that you have the ability, if you choose, to customize. Instead of using the default, you would go to Customize Settings to customize these. So course pretest is simply, it's a pretest that covers, they're usually 40 to 50 questions for each of the subjects, and they have items that test every single lesson within the course. It allows you as a diagnostic to really see where student levels of mastery are within each of the chapters. You get a report at the end that shows how they answered each question in the order that they answered them, but then you also have a toggle view that allows you to see how they did by chapter. That was what I was just mentioning earlier. So you can really dig at, okay, this student has mastered these concepts maybe, or has partial mastery of concepts within certain chapters, and has fully mastered or not mastered at all concepts in other chapters, so that's what that student should focus on. So use course pretest is the default setting for all of these modes because in most cases I feel that teachers want students to take a course pretest. If you don't, you have the ability to customize the settings. And you'll notice here that actually for each of these there's a description. So if I click on these, it tells you what exactly you're kind of agreeing to with the setting. You can also determine if you want to make the course pretest required or not. So you may use the course pretest, and then the student will see the course pretest when they log in, but the student's given an option to skip it. Right now, the default mode for all modes is required. So if you wish to make it an option for students, you can customize the settings and change that to no. The pretest is not required. So those are your course pretest settings. The lesson pretest is the second set of settings. So the lesson pretest is used for students and for you to see if the student has mastered the concept before they actually go into lesson level instruction. The default mode, default setting, excuse me, for all three modes is yes. And the passing score is set at 90%. That is based on a number of conversations with folks in adult education in terms of what they felt the minimum passing score should be for somebody for a lesson pretest. And by passing pretest score, in our view, that allows the student to skip the lesson. So there were some folks that we talked to that said it should be 100%. We shouldn't be letting students skip a lesson unless they've absolutely fully mastered the concept of this lesson. Most people said they understood that, but 90% seemed feasible. We set it at 90%. But if you feel that this should be higher, and again, a passing score being if the student passes this pretest, they get to skip the lesson, then you can set it higher. The lesson pretests are 10 questions. They cover all of the objectives within the lesson, so they do give you a good indicator of whether or not the student has a grasp of the concepts. You do have the ability to choose if you want the students to be able to skip based on a passing score on the lesson pretest. So again, most instructors feel that that's something that should be enabled, so that is why the default setting is yes. But if you want to alter that and say no, they're going to take the pretest, but they still have to take the lesson, you can change this setting to no. Finally, there's the lesson post-test passing score. That is set at 70%. It sounds like a number of you may have used the former GED Online program. That was the passing score in that program. That's the passing score in a number of our other programs, and we've not heard any complaints. If you really, based on maybe seeing that students aren't quite performing as well as you want after passing with 70%, and you want to pump that up to 80%, you certainly can. That, again, is something that you have the ability to do within the customized settings. Finally, there's a lesson block feature that's really only available for folks in the self-paced mode. So lesson block is a feature where if you have students working in self-paced mode, which as a reminder, you determine the scope and sequence, and students are forced to work in that order. So it's a little hands-off, but you're determining the set of lessons that students work in the order they work in. You can turn on what's called the lesson block. And the lesson block is a setting that if a student fails a lesson post-test, the student is unable to move forward until an instructor intervenes. So a student fails a post-test, you as the instructor will get a critical alert on that dashboard in that top left quadrant that says the student has failed, and you may wish to work with that student before unblocking them, or within that critical students area, you'll have a button that says unblock student, and you can unblock the student. But it's a way for you to monitor and make sure students aren't going too far in and just working through lessons as fast as they can to complete it, all the while failing them. So it's a safeguard that you have in there. We actually have the setting set as a no for that, so the lesson block is off, because a lot of folks feel that it can be inconvenient to have to go in every time a student fails a post-test. So it's set as no, but if you want to turn that on, again, you have the ability to do that. All of these settings, you have the ability to apply to each subject area, or you have the ability to apply them to all subject areas. So this could be a very quick step for you if you decide to just use the same mode for all subject areas. And the way you do, just to walk you through what those custom settings were, so if you did choose to change any of those default settings, you just go to Custom Settings, you're walk through a wizard, and here is where I can change any of those settings. So all of those things that I just walked you through, they're listed here. The course pretest options, the course lesson pretest options. So again, maybe you're one of those folks that says, I want this to be at 100%, and that's the only way a student can skip. I can change that. I continue on to the post-test, and maybe, again, I want to really be sure that my students have mastered concepts, so I can change this to 80%. I can continue, and now I have a confirmation screen that says, these are the settings that you have elected to customize. Yes, we're going to use the pretest. Yes, for the lesson pretest, it's used. The passing score is 100%, and I've set the passing score for the post-test at 80%. And there I have the ability to save and finish that. You always have the ability to change your settings for a course. But one thing to note for that is, so I just changed my settings actually for reading and writing. None of these classes right here are going to be impacted by that because these classes are all in motion. The only class that is going to see those new settings is a new class from this point forward. So that's one thing to note for any of these settings discussions that we have. They only apply to new classes if you decide to change them for some reason after you get into the system and you realize you like or don't like a setting that you've chosen. So that first step, as I said, or second step, excuse me, is establishing the course setting. The third step, and again, you're going to be prompted on this. You're not going to have to go through the motions that I'm going through right now. I'm just getting to the screens that you'll see. The third step is establishing the scope and sequence for a course. And so this is where you as the instructor have the ability to adjust the order of lessons. You have the ability to remove lessons if you want, so that instruction is delivered in the order that you prefer. So I'm going to go to that through sort of a backdoor way. And this is what you would see if you chose to customize the scope and sequence. If you are fine with the scope and sequence as it's set forth, just click Accept, and you don't have to go through this. The scope and sequence will be set. One thing to note about the scope and sequence for all of the courses in Common Core Achieve Online is we have the same chapter and lesson structure within the online program as we do with the print student books, and that chapter and lesson structure, is also the same as the print exercise books. So one of the nice things is if you happen to be using multiple programs within Common Core Achieve Online, there's a one-to-one sort of relationship between the lesson and chapter structure across all of those programs. So that you may do a book lesson in class and then assign the online lesson for homework. It's going to be covering the same content, but it is a different lesson. In terms of this organizing scope and sequence or customizing it, so here's where, again, if you choose to do so, you may select or deselect entire chapters or particular lessons that you don't want to teach. So maybe I won't teach this because I do a lot of in-class instruction on point of view. And that's selecting the lessons. The second thing you have the ability to do is order the lessons. So as you'll see, that Chapter 5 that I removed does not appear here. And if I click on, Chapter 1, you'll see that Lesson 1.2 and Lesson 1.4 are removed because I did that in the previous screen. But say I actually want to look at text structure as the very first thing that we do within the reading and writing course. I basically just click on that chapter, and I click on this arrow, and it's going to move Examine Text Structure to the first thing. If within a particular chapter I wanted to rearrange lessons, I do the same thing. I click on the chapter, and then over in the lessons, I click on the lesson I want to move, and I can move these up and down. And that's going to set the scope and sequence for my students. This matters most if you're doing that self-study mode in terms of the order of instruction, because this is the order that students will be forced to work. In that self-study mode, it's not that important. They're going to see all of the lessons and available to them all at once. It's just going to list those lessons in the order that you've provided. And then instructor-led mode, it really doesn't matter at all, because you're going to see your course syllabus in this order, but you as the instructor are going to need to assign each lesson in order for students to have access to it. So after you've done your rearranging, you have the ability to preview your syllabus, and you'll see I moved Chapter 4 here, then Chapter 1, then Chapter 2, and then Chapter 7 here is where I rearranged lessons, and you'll see that these are the lessons and chapters that I excluded down below. If you're okay with that, you click Save and Close, and then your syllabus is now set for that course. Again, you can change this at any time, but the changes that you make, if you decide to make them, will only be applied to new classes. So we've now covered 3 things in terms of course setup. One was that curriculum, establishing that curriculum, which we set to the GED. 2 is establishing the course mode, which, again, that's your choice, whether you want self-study, self-paced, or instructor-led. You'll see within here that I actually am using multiple modes within reading and writing, because I can adjust that at a class level. The 3rd thing you do is the scope and sequence, and accepting the scope and sequence for the course. And that's it. The 4th thing you do at that point is accept the settings for the class. Now, what you'll see here is I have one class that I've left available to you to see, where this is the final step. So all of these other classes are set in motion. But this sales demo class is not in motion. So I have the ability to not use the course settings that I've established for science, and I can adjust them. So if I click on yes, it will accept those settings. But if I click on no here, I'm going to see what my settings are for science, and you'll see that my settings are the default. So using the course pretest, the lesson pretest is at 90%. The lesson post-test is at 70%. And my mode is that self-study mode. I may decide that for this class I want to use instructor-led mode. So I go in, I click Edit, and I'm going to use my default settings for instructor-led mode. And I click on this, and now you're going to see in a second I'm going to be popped back to this dashboard screen, and you'll see that this class now has accepted those settings. It's aligned to the GED test, and it is in instructor-led mode. So that is the course setting setup, and that's the big sort of front-end thing that you need to do. There's, again, detailed instructions within the instructor manual that show you what each of the things mean, what self-study, what self-paced, what instructor-led modes mean. But once you've done that, for one course, you can, again, apply it to all courses, and it does apply to all classes, unless, in the case that you just saw, you decide that you want to adjust the settings for a particular class for one reason or another. Once you've done that, you have the ability to go ahead and get students moving within each of these courses. Now, if it's the self-paced mode or if it's self-study mode, those students are set to go. So self-study, the lessons are immediately released to students. In self-paced mode, you set the date that you want the course to release, and the student starts working on that day, and they can, again, move at whatever pace they want. In instructor-led mode, you're done. Students actually will now have access to the course pretest, but any assignments beyond that will not be delivered to students until you, the instructor, assign them. So I'm going to show you that added step that's a part of instructor-led. And one of the things I actually need to do first, because I'm going to work live in here, is see who my students are in this class. Okay. So for the class that I just accepted settings, the sales demo class in science, I am going to go to assignment, and I'm going to create an assignment for the students in that class. And again, this is something that you only really need to do in the instructor-led mode. I don't know if I actually clicked it. So what you'll see is a list of all of my lessons. You'll see that all of my lessons are unassigned. And you'll see that I have this pull-down menu here that asks me what I would like to do. So my default view is always to view the class syllabus. So I'm guessing most people aren't going to want to assign a single lesson at a time. You might want to assign a batch of lessons and to set due dates for them. So I'm going to go in and create a new assignment. And I may ask that my students by next week complete the introduction lesson and lessons 1, 2, and 3 of Chapter 1, Human Body and Health. So I select the lessons that I want to assign. I select the start date. The start date has to be tomorrow. So if you want students to have access tomorrow, you need to make sure that you create the assignment the day before, and it will be released to them tomorrow. That's one thing to note whenever you're using instructor-led mode. And I'm going to set my due date for next Friday. And I go to create. So you'll see that I get a confirmation that these are the lessons that I'm assigning. And it also gives you the option to send a message to your students. So what you can do is for these students, you can alter the subject line, and there's a message default that is pre-populated with the lessons that you've assigned, and then you can add a note. You might want to say that there will be a test on Friday on the content of these 3 lessons or something along those lines. Anything you want to type in here, you have the ability to do. And now when I click Send Message, now this class I only have 2 students in it. When I click Send Message, those 2 students are going to get this message. And again, Jackie is not going to see that Kenny is on the message, and Kenny is not going to see that Jackie is on the message. You have the ability to message any students that you want at any time. The students only have one-way communication to you. There is no student-to-student messaging within Common Core Achieve Online. So now you'll see that I'm back to my default view, which is View Class Syllabus, and you'll see that these are now upcoming lessons that are listed. So now I've got to create a new assignment. And this is one trick that I teach people who might want sort of that instructor control where you're reminded and you get these alerts that the student is past due on something, but you don't want to release all the lessons at once. So you'll notice that when I went to create a new assignment, all of the lessons that I had previously assigned disappear because I've already assigned them. And it sort of rolls up whatever remaining lessons I have in the order of the syllabus so that I can do this very quickly. So I'm going to actually just show you something real quick that you might do. Is say you want to have a self-study kind of mode, but you want to make sure that students are actually finishing assignments within a time frame that makes sense. So I'm going to do the rest of Chapter 1, and I'm going to set a start date of actually tomorrow as well. But I'm going to push the due date out a week to June 5th, maybe June 6th. We'll stick with Fridays. So now I'm going to create, I'm just going to submit the assignment. So now you're going to see that starting tomorrow, students in this class will have access to a number of lessons. They'll have the introduction and the first half of Chapter 1. But they'll also have the second half of Chapter 1. The due date for that first half is next, actually I think I hit Thursday, on Friday. And then the second half of the assignment is due the following Friday. So I'm not restricting students who might make their way through all of these assignments very quickly. They can go on and do the rest of the assignments that are due the following week. But I am sort of monitoring what they have available to them and what their due dates are. So in very short time, if you know the structure of how you want to make your way through this course, you can go through and create all of these assignments very quickly. Maybe it's a chapter a week. But once you've done that, they're all set in motion. And the assignments will be released to students based on the dates that you set. You always have the ability to edit any of your upcoming assignments. So you'll see I've created assignments for those first 6 or 7 lessons, and none of them have started. So I do have the ability to edit those assignments that I've created. Say I need to push back the start date a week, or I need to push the due date back because I realize the students aren't going to be able to finish them on time. I have the ability to go in there and do that. And I'm sorry that this is a little slow. I have to blame Comcast because I've been having issues here at home today. So here's where I see my assignments that I've created, and they're all upcoming. And so I have the ability to adjust the start date or the end date for each of these, or to cancel it altogether if I decide I don't want this assignment to be ready for students at this time. So I'm going to go back to that main subjects page and very quickly show you some of the other things. You always have the ability to look at your class settings. You always have the ability to adjust your class settings if your class hasn't started. So you'll see here, there's a class that has already started. And since it's already started, you cannot change your class settings. If I go to that science class that I just created, the sales demo class, and look at their class settings, you're going to see that that red message is not available. While I've created assignments for this class, which is an instructor-led mode, the class hasn't started because the first lessons are going to start tomorrow. So if I decide I actually want to change that mode or change any of these settings for some reason, the window of opportunity for me to do that is still open. But once this class starts, the class settings for the class are locked. The other thing you have for each class is a class list, and this really is just for you to see the students within a particular class. So maybe there's a particular class that's going to be affected because they're a Wednesday afternoon and you're not going to be there. You could go here, and now I only have one student in here, but you could click on this button here and send a message to your selected students, this class, and say, you know, here, I'm not going to be in, so class is canceled this Wednesday. You also, within the student roster, have the ability to log in as each student and see their individual reports. So this is where you actually go to access those reports for the individual student. And if a student is saying they're having difficulty with one thing or another within the program, this is where you have the ability to log in as them to see what it is that they are actually seeing on the student end. So that's a nice feature. You'll see for each course there's also these four buttons up here. Course settings is what we've already walked through, and again, you can change those at any time, but again, if you change them, they're only going to apply to new classes, not your current classes. Content preview, we already took a look at, which I went through in order to show you how the scope and sequence is set. The content preview is actually the area where you can see all of the lessons, the lesson pre-test and the lesson post-test. So this is where you actually have the opportunity to preview the content for each of these lessons. I'm going to open up one. Actually, I don't want to open that one up. I'm going to open this one because I know folks really like this lesson. So each of the courses actually has a course introduction. And that course introduction just shows students what they're going to be learning in this course and how the lessons actually show up.
Section.
So now you'll hear this audio that's read for each one of these. I forgot that I've already started this lesson, so it jumps me back in where I last left off. But you'll see all the lessons are the same in terms of the format. There's this pull-out menu that shows students where they are within the lesson. There's always an introduction screen that indicates what they're going to learn, and they begin. Let me just jump through. So you'll see content like the old program is built sort of in incremental chunks, so it's not a huge content load all at once. Students sort of control the release of each build within the program. But this introductory lesson actually shows students, and you, for that matter, if you want to look at them, how all the course controls work within the program, how the program works in terms of how they can start and stop their instruction, how they use the various tools. And you're going to see in a second when I get to the end of this particular section that we have interactivities that mirror some of the things that they'll see on the GED if students are doing the GED. So there's a drag and drop item that's actually testing and just making sure they understand how to navigate the courseware. So like the GED where there is a drag and drop feature, students use this. Hopefully I got this right. And they get feedback right away. If it's incorrect, they get incorrect feedback, and it resets the answers until they get the item correct. So that's what a lesson looks like. And again, they all have that structure. One thing to note is you'll see there's always an introduction and a summary. And then you'll see there's sections in between. This might be main idea in detail as a lesson. And it's main idea, implied main idea, and stated main idea. That's an important thing to note because on their assessment reports for that lesson, that's how the items are going to be organized in the report. So they'll be able to look at, just like the course pretest, how they answered questions in order, but they'll also be able to go to a by section tab that allows them to see which items in this section they got right and wrong and which items in this section they got right or wrong. So it may be a case that they really understand stated main idea, but they had difficulty with implied main idea, and that's going to be identified clearly for them on the assessment report, so they can go back to the lesson and go straight to the section that they might need to review. The third thing I want to show you that's available for all subjects is resources. And in particular, I want to show you this for the purpose of what's available in reading and writing and what's available in social studies. So these are all downloadable resources for you as the instructor. And in particular, one of the things that we always get asked is there writing in the program? The answer is yes, but it's not writing directly in Common Core Achieve Online. We don't have any sort of essay graders. We do go through language skills. We do go through mechanics within the program, but there are no lessons where students are actually writing. However, we do offer writers' workshops, which is a download on the teacher resource page here. And you'll see that these writers' workshops have them working through a great number of skills that are required for the extended response questions on the GED test. And you'll see it's an actual lesson plan that you can provide the student with where they're looking at skills like creating outlines, being reminded of things such as verb tense agreement, given prompts, given sort of tips in terms of what to think about as they're writing in terms of details, in terms of clarity, in terms of organization, and then after they write. This is another student handout where they are comparing and being asked to use evidence for this writer's workshop. So in this one, which is Analyze Speaker's Purpose, they're given a resignation speech, in this case from Richard Nixon, that they read, and then another passage that they read to extract. So they're given multiple sources from which they need to extract evidence. And there's one per chapter within this resource that's available to you. Along the way, there's also lesson plans for each and every lesson within reading and writing. And this is for you to understand what the content is within each of the lessons and for you to understand what you can do with students to support what they're doing in the online program. So it helps you see what the vocabulary is that they're going to learn in the lesson, what the objectives are. It's going to help you understand what the various section objectives are and things that you might want to ask students as a follow-up. This is a download, so you have the ability to type notes to support your instruction at any given time as you're going through. And one thing you'll note for every single lesson plan within the online reading and writing program, there is a writing activity that's provided to you that actually shows what a highly effective and effective response is. So every single lesson has sort of a mini writing prompt where they're getting practice writing, and then at the chapter level there are writers' workshops that get through activities that are writing-based that mirror what students are going to have to do for the extended response within the GED exam and within the other tests that do have essays. In social studies, we also do provide resources such as that are relevant for all of them. We also have the correlation charts. Right now, the GED correlation chart is the only one in there. We soon will have the correlation charts of the lessons to the high-set and to the task test. So those are to come. They're not in there yet, but they will be available. Within social studies, one of the resources, again, we have writers' workshops for social studies called Write About Social Studies. And this is a series of extensive writing activities where they're doing the various types of writing that one needs to do in the area of social studies. Again, citing evidence and using that evidence to do each of these tasks. There's 10 of them total in social studies. So those are the resources that are available to instructors. There is a notes area for you to capture and create notes that you want to sort of remember as you're doing instruction. So maybe you want to determine how you're using this with other things that you teach. You have the ability to create a note for each lesson and say what you did do, what reminders of what you want to do next time, anything along those lines. And these are savable. You have the ability to print them. You actually have the ability to export them so that you have a hard copy of all of your notes for the course as you're gathering them. Users is where I have the ability to see all users within the program. This allows me to sort of monitor various things. Say I want to take a look at my students and see when they last accessed it. So this is going to actually, if I click on last access, it's going to tell me sort of from the most recent to the least recent who's been in the program. So if, say, this week I just click on last access because it's Thursday and I want to see which students have actually been in the program this week, I could see that, based on what it said here, who's been in it this week, and say maybe these first 4 students have all been in the program within 4 days. I might click on them and send a message saying, hey, great job, glad to see that you're working the program, keep up the good work. Or vice versa, I may see that these 2 students haven't been in the program in over a week, and I might click on them and send a message to the selected students saying, hey, I've noticed that you're not doing work in Common Core Achieve Online. Please be reminded that working in the online program is part of your course credit. And you have the ability to do that within this users area. The messaging area is a standard sort of inbox. This is an internal messaging system. This doesn't email out to email addresses, and emails don't come in to this message center. This is for system messaging to students and for students to message you. And then finally, there's the reports area. There are 3 types of reports that I can run. And actually, before I do that, I want to show what a student report looks like. So I'm going to go to Iris. And so this is a student level report. This is something that I've been talking to you about in the program. So if it's 4 subjects, so I can see that there's science, social studies, math, and reading and writing are all in here. And I have the ability to expand or contract these so it's more usable. But I'm going to go to science and see the course pretest. This allows me to see what the passing score was for the student, what the student's actual score was. Please note that I'm not that bad at science. I just completed the assessment just to complete it. When they completed it and how long they took to complete it. So that should be an indication that I didn't really try, since it took me less than a minute to complete the test. If I click on this, you'll see the pretest or the course pretest report for the student. So what you'll see is how the student answered and what the correct answer is. If there's any supporting graphics or such, those are embedded in here that you can open up, and the feedback for each of them. So this is where the student can go through and see how they did on an item-by-item basis. You'll see, again, I didn't attempt most of them, so it says not attempted. 2 of the nice features that are part of these detailed assessment reports for the student is the first, as I said, there's this toggle that allows them to view by section. And we are fixing this for some reason. The order is all screwed up. But you'll see that it tells me the number of items they got correct on a chapter-by-chapter basis, or if it was a lesson-level assessment, on a section-by-section basis, so that they can see, maybe heredity and evolution, they got 5 out of 5 correct. So probably not something I need to look at, and I can click to see what the questions are within that section. However, in ecosystems, they got 0 out of 4 correct. So that might be something that you use with your student to sort of create an individualized study plan for that student based on these number of correct items. So they do have the ability to print this view so that you can sort of see and work with the student to say, why don't we start with Chapter 4 and then work on Chapter 8. Chapter 6, you did great, so work on that if you need to or decide you want to, but it's a lower priority. The second nice thing about these detailed assessment reports, and the course pretest is long, but the lesson pre and post tests are each 10 questions. So if the student goes through and they see this, and they either, one, still don't understand why chloroplast is correct and it's not lysosomes based on the feedback, and you'll see there's pretty extensive feedback for each question. They can click on this question or any number of questions within the report that they have a question that they want to ask the instructor, and click Send Message up here. And it's going to send the instructor. I'm actually sending it from the instructor end, so I'm sending this to the student. But the student could send you, the instructor, a question saying, hey, I didn't get these items. Can you help me? And when they send this message, you're going to get a link to their assessment report so that you can open up this particular report for that student. Conversely, you as the instructor can send a message to the student, which I'm doing right now, that says, hey, I saw that you had difficulty with this item or that item. Here's a better explanation or whatever. And please see me if you still don't understand this item. So you have the ability to sort of create this communication back and forth between the student and the teacher that really digs down at the particular items that the student has issues with. This is great, particularly obviously in a distance learning environment, if you're not working face-to-face with students very often, but you want to address their concerns or questions on individual tests. So that's the lesson, that's the student level report, excuse me. This reports area is where you have the ability to do class level reports and class management. So there's 3 types of reports, and I know, and I don't even know who's still on. It looks like most of you are still on, but if you can give me maybe 5 more minutes, I'll go very quickly through the reports, and then if we have some time and folks want to stick around for questions, we can. There's 3 types of reports in the program. The class performance report is for you to sort of just monitor the class as a whole and see on a lesson level how students scored on any pre or post tests for the lessons or for the course. There's the student activity report, which is where you have the ability to select a date range and see what students have completed within that date range. Or this is where those recurring reports come into play, where you can say every Friday or maybe every Saturday, so you get in the full week, I want a report that is emailed to me that says who has completed lessons in all subjects or in a particular subject. And then there's a time and system report, and this is where it's tracking when the students have logged in and out of the system and the date and time they did so. This may or may not be something that's required for New Mexico, but I do have some states that this is a very important feature because they need to, in case of audit, be able to show exactly when students were in the online program. And this is where those reports are run. I'll show you these very quickly. The class performance report is, again, that sort of at-a-glance view for you to see how students are doing. Now, this is not very telling because there's only 1 student, and we're looking at the course pretest. I'm going to go to Chapter 5 here. It has the same pull-down menu structure of the class, the subject, and the chapter. And this is where I can see the pre- and post-test scores for each student within the class. Now, again, I only have 1 student in this class, but envision 10 students in this class. And maybe you're telling students that you want them to do the pretest before class on a certain topic, but not to move on, don't go into instruction until after class. But maybe you could use that pretest score as sort of a gauge and look down the line and see, okay, wow, my students really don't understand this topic, so I'm going to have to make sure that we're spending a heavy amount of time in class on it. Or conversely, you might see that your students have a pretty strong level of mastery of that topic based on the pretest scores. And so maybe you readjust what you're going to teach that day based on those pretest scores. The other thing that's nice is as you're monitoring as a class how students are performing, say for lesson 5.1 on the post-test, you have 10 students, and 8 of them did great, but you have 2 students that had difficulty. Just like I showed you in that other area, you have the ability to select specific students within a class by clicking on this checkbox and to send a message to the selected students. So if you wanted to note to a couple students that might have had difficulty on that post-test, hey, come see me, and we can walk through any issues you have. You have the ability to do that. Again, it's a nice sort of point of use message capability so that you're able to message students based on a particular need looking at this class performance report. You have the ability to export this as an Excel file. You also have the ability to print this if you want a hard copy of your record. I'll go back to the report's main page, and I'm actually going to quickly jump to the time and system report. So the time and system report is where you can select a class or all of your classes, select a date range. Now, as you probably saw from that previous view, I don't have very many active students in here because I'm not on often with these demo students. So I'm going to set from the start of the year till today, but you might obviously do smaller date ranges, and I'm going to select all of the students within the student user list. I have two options for how I want to see this. I could click display, and that's going to show me every single user, where they logged in from, what time they logged in at, what time they logged out, and how long they spent within the program. This is login and log out. This is not their actual time working in lessons and working in assessment. This is really a date and time stamp for when the student actually accessed the system. Again, that's important for some folks for reporting purposes. So I could view this on screen, or I have the ability to download this. And when I download this, it downloads as an Excel file. And since I have Excel open, I might, yeah. So it's that same thing you just saw on screen, but it's a list of students in an Excel format. Now, this is very manipulatable. I don't know if that's the word, data, where you can use the features within Excel to sort. So if I wanted to sort by student name, I can do that. And then one of the things that you can do if you want to actually see what the total time is that the student spent in the system is either highlight the list of cells that are associated with that name, and you'll see there's a sum here that this student has spent a total of 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 32 seconds in the program. Or if you wanted to actually have this as a documented record, I can actually insert rows after each student's name. And then go into this total area where I would find the total for the time spent and just do an auto sum. And it will tally that total for each of my students as I click on auto sum. So you'll see Iris is the big winner. She spent 5 hours so far in the program. This student has spent 3 hours, 49 minutes. And this student has spent 1 hour and 7 minutes in the program. So it's an Excel spreadsheet. All of our reports are exportable in Excel, and they give you that capability of sorting in whatever order you want to make the best use of them based on your needs as the instructor. I'm going to close this, and it's going to ask me if I want to save. No. And the third type of report, the one I skipped over, is the student activity report. So just to show you that real quickly, and I have a number of these reports. You can create a one-time report or a recurring report. And what these are is you name the report, and you can select a specific class, or the default is all. You could select a specific subject, or you could select all. And you select a specific event that you want. So you might want a report that tells you and is emailed to you on a weekly basis when students have completed a post-test. And that is going to tell you that what students have completed entire lessons, so the pretest, the lesson, the post-test, within the date range that you select. And it's also going to give you their scores and how much time you took. So this might be probably the most often used report, because it just gives you the list of scores of all your students on whatever given time range you set for the report. You might also want to maybe do a chapter completed, so that on every, for this report, I'm going to see who's completed, a chapter, and maybe I want to message that student just to congratulate them on making their way through a chapter. This gives you that sort of detailed report that tells you which students have completed chapters, and then you can message them. But then I set a date range. Again, I haven't done much within this, so I'm going to go back to January. And January 1st, sorry, and today, and then I'm going to download this. So this one-time report is an immediate download, and it runs this report for, again, all of my classes, all subjects, who's completed a post-test and who's completed a chapter, which I don't have anybody. I know that. And this is going to be a very dismal report because, again, there's not much. So Iris and Gavin are the only students that have completed anything. But what you will see on any of these reports is this range of dates that you ran the report. You'll see the lesson that they completed. You'll see what a passing score is for that class and what their score was. So this student actually passed. Now, again, when we talk about sorting, you could sort to see who's failed what tests on this report. So that you're paying attention to that. Or you could sort by the lesson and then by result, so you can see at a glance if all students are working on Chapter 5 and finished, you know, which lessons they're in particular having difficulty with. Again, it gives you that time spent, and that is a data field. So you'll see when I select a multiple range of them, it does add them up. So an hour, 27 minutes were spent in these assessments. And this is a one-time report that you run manually each time. If you wanted a report like that sent on a regular basis, you go back to reports and you create what's called a recurring report. And this is where you actually set a frequency. So say you have a standing meeting that you've created an Outlook meeting invite for, where you want it to repeat every week. This is the same exact thing. So I might run that same report, but I want it for all of my classes, for all subjects, and I want to know course pre-test, course post-test, lesson post-test, and chapter. Those are the 4 milestones that I want. And I want it to run weekly. I want it to run every 1 week on, oops, sorry about that, I hit a button, on Saturday. So what I've just done here is on a weekly basis, every single week, on Saturday, I'm going to get an email that sends me a zip file with that report that you just saw that tracks all my student activity as an Excel file. I could do it monthly. I could do it on day 1 of every month. So day 1 of every month is basically, if I ran it right now, the first run of that would be June 1st. So that report would actually tell me what students did in May. My next report would be on July 1st. And that report would tell me what students did in July, or excuse me, in June. And so this is sort of a less frequent report, but you could, for any of these, do, say you want a biweekly report, you could do every 2 weeks. And so every 2 weeks on Saturday, you would get a report that says what students have done. So this is for you to sort of set these reports in motion once, and then to never again have to worry about it for a particular class. And they'll just be emailed to you. You can also set start and end dates. So if I was doing this weekly every 2 weeks, I'd say I want my first one to run this Saturday, which means the next one would run in June, et cetera. And then again, you can do much like an invite, no end date, or you can end after a certain number of occurrences or by a certain date. And once you save that report is saved, and those emails will be automatically sent to you at your email address itself. So I know I've gone way over, but we did start a little late, and I did want to show you as much as possible to help you be as successful as possible when you start working in this program. I'm going to open up, and I don't know, Ken, if you've taken a look, or Natasha.
Hear me? Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
yeah. Are there any questions out there? Sorry, we went a few minutes over.